Hi, so I guess I am live. Thank you for all the questions that you've put on the Facebook group. That's really interesting. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you have difficulty hearing me. I was intending to do this on my phone, but the thing I was going to use to hold my phone decided to give up the ghost at the last moment. So I think it's good to connect. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for being part of the group. It's really interesting, and I guess with holidays here, it's a little bit quiet from time to time. But I thought we'd just like reconnect a little bit. So I've got a list of questions, so I've written them down, and I'd like to just go through them. And some of them we've touched on before, but with new members, they don't always. Well, new members won't have a memory of things that we've talked about before. So let's just have a think about this. Wake up with panic in the morning. I mean, that's something that we've talked about, and it's a really pervasive problem. When you wake up with panic in the morning, or you wake up with anxiety, it spoils the day. Now, typically, the anxiety or the panic is worse in the morning, and it wears off during the course of the day. And we might ask the question, why does that happen? Why does it sometimes wear off as the day goes on? So perhaps I've spoken to people in the evening, I'm perfectly fine. Go to bed, sleep like a baby, wake up having anxiety or panic. The answer has to be that you're running a program in your brain which basically says that you are at some form of risk, you're at some form of threat. Okay, it has to be the case because you're in bed and you're asleep. Now, your conscious brain is really good at filtering out what we might call your unconscious emotions or unconscious memories and stuff like that, right? So your conscious brain filters out a lot of stuff. When you're asleep, of course, your conscious brain is not able to filter stuff out, and that's when it comes in. It sort of like rises up. It's a bit like a smell rising up, or gas rising up from a volcanic area, if you like. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to convince your brain, your unconscious brain, that you're not at threat when you're asleep. Now, we've done this before in this group. We did something called the Kilimanjaro Experiment. I devised an intervention which is basically an EMDR audio, so eye movement desensitization and reprocessing audio, and we used that audio very last thing at night. So I think it's like 12 minutes or 13 minutes long. You listen to it with earphones, earbuds, very last thing at night, and you do it for a week. Now, I'm quite happy to make that available to you again, because when we did it the first time, we had a handful of people, I think like 7 or 8 people who did it. And the thing about problems, psychological problems, is sometimes they're worse and sometimes they're less bad, but we forget. When we think about them, we tend to chunk them in a sort of a global kind of category, right? So, oh, it's bad. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, if people are having difficulty, I hope I'm broadcasting and you can hear me okay. Yes. Right. So, the Kilimanjaro Experiment. We did a questionnaire at the beginning of a week, and we did it for 7 nights. We did a questionnaire. Everybody who did it found some benefit from it. Now, I guess this brings us to a larger point, right? If you've got a problem, you can always do something about the problem. There's always something that you can do. Now, you might not know what it is, but there's always something, right? But you've got to do something. If you don't do anything, the problem persists. So I'm quite happy to make the great, brilliant. Thank you, Vanessa. I'm quite happy to make the Kilimanjaro Experiment available to you again. But how hard is it? You put some earbuds in, you listen to something, it's quite pleasant, it's quite interesting, 12 minutes, you go to sleep. Bingo. You have less anxiety and panic in the morning. It costs you nothing, it's free, I'll give it to you. You just got to do it, right? That's the thing. You just got to do it. And if you do it, you'll get an outcome. Almost guaranteed, because everyone who's done it so far has had an outcome. If you don't do it, you won't get an outcome. So we've got to think about this. The approach that I always push is active self-help, right? It's stuff that you can do yourself, but you've got to do it. So I will make the Kilimanjaro Experiment stuff available again. It's buried deep in the Facebook group, but you know, I'll sort of bring it back to the front again so you can see it. Ah, lovely. Thank you, Catherine, Vanessa, Tracy. Good. So it's good. Right. So the Kilimanjaro Experiment will solve, to a degree, waking with anxiety and panic. Now, Vanessa noted that she has the feeling of being overwhelmed. And a few people agreed, you know, yeah, I feel overwhelmed. Okay. To think about this, we have to think about it like we've got to split ourselves into two parts in a way. We've got to say, I feel overwhelmed. Fair enough. Okay, that's a legitimate emotional experience. Am I overwhelmed? Am I actually overwhelmed? If we think of all the things that I have to do, are they overwhelming to me, or are they just like a busy life, let's say? And what we find is that there's often a difference between what actually is and how we feel. And it's how we feel usually has the control over what we do. If you think about the kind of cognitive behavior therapy approach, you know, we draw, I haven't got the picture to show you, but we draw, and if you've been in Panic Pit Stop and you've seen some other things, you'll recognize this. We have thoughts, we have emotions, we have behaviors, and have sensations. We always have all of those all of the time. You know, you can't have an emotion without having thoughts or some kind of cognitive activity to interpret the emotion. You can't have a behavior without having some planning for the behavior to occur, which is cognitive activity. Likewise, you can't have an emotion without having some physical sensation that responds to that emotion. So when you feel, right, but now the interesting thing is you can come into this loop at any point. So for instance, if you're very practiced at experiencing emotions, let's say you're very empathic or you're very attuned to your emotions, you could come into a feeling of overwhelm. And this is the really kind of like critical thing. People always, often, well, almost always believe what their emotions tell them. So I feel overwhelmed, therefore I am overwhelmed. Okay. The question is though, well, if we leave it at that, you're just going to feel overwhelmed and nothing's ever going to change. We've got to find an intervention. And the intervention is this, right? Are you actually overwhelmed? Literally, are you actually overwhelmed? Or does you just feel like you're overwhelmed? And so we've got this, when I'm working with clients, if any of my clients are on, you'll know that I do this. I go, well, like this is what's actually true, right? So we might say you feel overwhelmed, but actually you can cope with this, you can cope with this. You do it, right? You do it. Yeah, okay, I do it. Okay, but you feel overwhelmed. So what we have is we've got reality and we have how you feel about it. And these are not the same thing. And how you feel about it is going to be causing the problem. And therefore, moving your emotions to be more in line with reality has to be more of a solution. So what we do is we devise, and I use this a lot because it's like easy to do, and really it always works. We devise a phrase that is true, right? But we don't believe it. So it is true, but we don't feel it emotionally. And you know, if you've any of my clients are on, you'll have some of these that we've used yourself. But let's just think about overwhelmed, right? I feel overwhelmed, but actually I'm not actually literally overwhelmed. Okay, therefore I am stronger, more able, more capable than I feel I am. Therefore I am more able than I feel I am. Therefore I am more capable than I feel I am. Therefore I am more resilient than I feel I am. Therefore I am more on top of things than I feel I am. Do you get the idea? I am more, better, etc. than I feel. And that's a truth. Whatever one you choose, I don't know which one sits with you particularly, but I'd say able, competent, expert, on top of things, and stuff. Okay. You pick a statement that is true, but you don't feel it. Now, you practice it. If you want to get good at something, you have to practice. And this is such a good intervention. And I promise you, if you get the right statement that is true, but you don't feel it, and you practice it, as I'm going to tell you to do it, It will work. If you don't do it, it won't work. Simple, right? You say it like this. So let's say I'm more able than I feel I am. Okay, let's say, right? So you say it like this. So you say it under your breath, you move your mouth, you hear it with your ears, and you think it. And in so doing, you're activating different parts of your brain. Moving your mouth activates Broca's area, Wernicke's area. Hearing it comes into the thalamus. Thinking it activates the cortex. So if you want to get good at something, you must practice. And if you practice this, 10 repetitions in a set, 20 sets a day, spread out throughout the day. Now, if you did all 200, that's 200 repetitions. If you did all 200 at 6 o'clock in the morning, you feel great. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you won't remember, because all of the repetitions are tied to a time context. We have to spread it out, because negative thoughts, negative beliefs, negative experiences are, in principle, available throughout the time. Okay. So you do 10 repetitions in a set, 20 sets a day spread out. Now, if you do that and you do not get an outcome, I'll be very surprised, and in fact, email me and we'll sort something out for you instead. The trick is you create something that is genuinely true, but you don't feel it, which means you don't believe it, right? And then you practice it. And what happens is, over the course of a week, I'd have to say 2 weeks for some things, right? Over the course of 1 to 2 weeks, your emotions move to be more in line with reality. Now, the measure that I would normally use is, right? So if we're using overwhelm as an example, I would say, so you would say this, right? Say I feel overwhelmed. You go, I feel overwhelmed. Okay. How true does that feel for you? I feel overwhelmed. How true does that feel? Well, 0, it's not at all true. 7 is completely true. I feel overwhelmed. Yeah, that's 7. I feel overwhelmed. Okay. That's where you're starting from. After a week or 2 weeks, and a week's a bit short, but 2 weeks certainly, you know, you're going to get a substantial outcome. After 2 weeks, I feel overwhelmed. How true does that feel? Well, no, it doesn't feel true. You've moved the emotion to be more in line with the actual reality. So it's a really good intervention. I've been doing it for that long. I kind of think I invented it, but it's a mantra. So, you know, people have been doing things with mantras for probably thousands of years. Okay, now, if I jump down, I've got a list of questions, but if I jump down my list a little bit, how to stop feeling the fear. So that's Vanessa, how to stop feeling the fear. The same principle applies. Anxiety in any form, generalized anxiety disorder, Samantha, is just a version of anxiety. And all anxiety has the same basic characteristic. Now, let me ask you a question, and I suppose I'll have to answer it myself. Okay. I worry about chicken. I worry about travel. I worry about the sky coming down. I worry about the storm, which is coming. I worry about drinking. I worry about drugs. I worry about the economy. I worry about subsidence. I worry about my family, and I worry about driving. What is my problem? You might say you're preoccupied with worry, right? So my problem is I worry. Now, the contents of my worry doesn't matter, because when you meet someone who is a really practiced worrier, they can worry about one thing, but when that gets resolved, when you sort of they get reassurance or whatever, the worry moves on to something else. It's the process of worry which is the killer in this instance. Okay, and it's the same principle with anxiety. It's the process of anxiety. Now, for some people, anxiety takes the form of anxiety about health. For some people, it takes the form of obsessive thought processes, obsessive compulsive, that kind of idea. For some people, it's a phobia. For some people, it's panic. But it's the basic process that creates the particular manifestation of anxiety remains the same. And so we have to ask the question, what, at its root, what is anxiety? Well, at its heart, anxiety, as I say, and you've heard me say it, I guess, many times, anxiety is a feeling of fear that is inappropriate for the circumstances in which you're at. So, okay, if you're sitting in my office and I pull out a revolver and I say, I'm going to shoot you, you should feel fear. Okay? If I pull out a chocolate bar and say, I'm going to shoot you with this chocolate bar, you should laugh at me. So anxiety is an inappropriate feeling of fear given the circumstances that you're in. Okay? So therefore, anxiety is always an overestimation of threat. Now, if you're in a genuine threatening situation, you'd feel fear. That's perfectly legitimate. It's like, that's how it is. That's how it's meant to be. Your genetics and your instincts and everything will make you feel fear, because fear activates you to do stuff. It activates you to fight back. It activates you to escape. It activates you to be angry. Fear is a brilliant emotion for doing stuff. But if you're sitting on the sofa watching, The Big Bang Theory or Simpsons or whatever, and you feel fear, that's inappropriate. Likewise, actually, if you've been in a road traffic accident, or if you're a veteran of something, or if you've been involved in some kind of frightening experience, and you watch a TV show that kind of reminds you of the frightening experience, that fear is inappropriate because you're not actually in a frightening situation. Therefore, fear is an overestimation of threat. I hope that makes sense, because it's critical to understanding the next part of this puzzle. I'm going to create an intervention for you which will help you to feel less anxious, and it will do that by helping you to feel less fearful. Now, I did this for someone a couple of weeks ago, and they said, that's really simple. I said, yeah, after 25 years of practicing it and developing it and thinking about it and understanding it, and having worked with 800 clients and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I make it seem simple. But that's the active self-help approach, right? We synthesize it down to something that you can do to change the situation, because it's exactly the right thing to change the situation. So, long-standing anxiety is long-standing emotion of fear misplaced in the context in which you're at, right? Okay. Therefore, long-standing anxiety, long-standing fear is the opposite of safety, right? When you feel anxious, you do not feel safe. When you feel fear, you do not feel safe. Now, where we kind of misinterpret it is you feel anxious, which basically means you feel frightened, right? You assume that the emotion is legitimate. Now, if you were let's be a zebra. You're a zebra on the Serengeti, and you have a sudden feeling of fear. What are you going to do? Everyone says you're going to run. No, that's not the answer. Everyone says the next thing is you're going to, well, I don't know what the next thing is. What actually you're going to do is you're going to look around and see where the threat is coming from. Then, once you've assessed the threat, you're going to run. Now, when you have this feeling of fear, you don't know what to do because you don't know where the threat's coming from. Your brain naturally looks for the threat, and it goes, oh, well, it's because I can't drive. It's because it's too hot. It's because I've eaten too much. It's because the elevator's too stuffy. It's because I had an argument. It's because I've got too much to do. It's because I'm overwhelmed. Your brain will look for a reason for your anxiety, but the actual reason is that you've practiced feeling anxious for, let's say, years. I mean, thank you some of the questions, but like, we're talking about, a decade and more of feeling anxious, right? If you want to get good at something, you have to practice it. You have practiced being anxious. And I don't mean that you've deliberately practiced being anxious, but you have practiced accepting that anxiety is a legitimate emotion in the context in which you're in. Okay? When you post the questions, you've said, I feel anxious and I've sort of struggled with it for like 10, 12, 19, 17 years, commonly people have had this experience. Right. You've struggled on, you've done the best you can in the circumstances, you've got through it, it's been a nightmare, it's exhausting, it costs you a lot of time and effort and all the rest of it. But all the time you're struggling on, you're accepting the legitimacy of anxiety as a thing in your life. And my whole approach is that anxiety is not legitimate. You do not need to feel anxious because it does not belong in your life. The anxiety you're feeling is a consequence of fear. You are not actually threatened. And we've got to get that kind of that distinction across, because that provides us with so many things that we can do to challenge the anxiety, right? If you could honestly say, I feel anxious and I feel frightened, because fear is the emotion behind anxiety. I feel fearful, I feel anxious, I feel frightened, but I am safe. If you could say that and believe it, we're halfway there to a solution. Now, you've practiced and practiced and practiced for, you know, however many years. So therefore, you know, there's not a quick fix for anxiety. It's I'd say it's a medium-sized journey, you know, which is why I did the Panic Pit Stop course for 6 weeks, because, you know, that's quite a lot of intervention with 100 and odd videos, you know. And so that kind of journey is going to more or less deal with the anxiety so that you're freed, really. Anyway, I'm going to give you an intervention, and it falls along the same line as the overwhelm thing, right? You feel anxious, therefore you feel frightened, right? But you are safe. Now, if anyone has an issue with that, please type in the issue, right? If you are not safe in this moment, please, you know, tell me why you're not safe. But I would suggest that physiologically, physically, your body is safe. You just don't feel safe, right? So now we've got the same disconnect. This is true. This is how I feel. And these are not the same thing. And so we have to start to practice what's true. And your brain will go, and I've seen this like hundreds and hundreds of times. Right now, if you've long-standing anxiety, your brain is going, yeah, you've got to be anxious. And you go, yeah, you're right, I've got to be anxious. Because A, I don't have an alternative kind of viewpoint, and B, it's what I'm used to. If you were to practice what I'm going to show you in a minute, and if you were to do it for long enough, your brain will go, okay, if you don't want to be anxious, you should have said, and it'll just stop being anxious. Your brain will go, okay, fair enough, you know, I don't care. And my general principle is your brain gives you what it thinks you want. So if you accept anxiety in your life, your brain will give you anxiety. If you accept depression as a legitimate thing, right? You know, yeah, I feel anxious. Yeah, it's legitimate. You know, if you accept it, you don't challenge it, your brain will just give you more, because that's what it does. So the challenge is this, and it's you say, I am safer than I feel. It's a simple thing, right? You are safer than you feel. So you say, I am safer than I feel. Okay, I don't feel safe, but I am safer than I feel. So we're using the logic of reality, of actuality, to change your emotions. 10 repetitions in a set, 20 sets a day. Now, if you're particularly anxious, I'd say 30 sets a day. Oh my God, 30 sets a day, I've got to work, you know, I haven't got time. 20 sets a day will take you 6 minutes. 30 sets a day will take you 9 minutes. So if you want to genuinely make a change in anxiety, I'm asking for between 6 to 9 minutes of your time. If you can't spare 6 to 9 minutes of your time, I would just say, how much time do you spend? How much time does anxiety take, right? How much time does feeling anxious take out of your day? And wouldn't it be better to invest 6 to 9 minutes to not feel anxious? I would say so. And it's a nice exercise because is no like footprint, right? You just say, I am safer than I feel I am, under your breath, right? I'm safer than I feel I am. You move your mouth, you hear it, you think it. And in so doing, that is an active self-help strategy, right? You're doing something to challenge your brain's program that says, you've got to be frightened, right? Because you're being frightened, you've got to be frightened. Right? You're creating an alternative place to be. Now, so in a sense, I think I've dealt with the questions of like how to stop feeling the fear. Long-standing anxiety, is it possible to change? Of course it is. I've had several clients over the years who have cured themselves of type 2 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes usually comes on because of lack of exercise, diet, overweight, all the rest of it, male metabolic syndrome. But they cured themselves by dieting down to the point where they were no longer diabetic. And, let's say type 2 is an acquired or a more acquired diabetic kind of problem, but they cured themselves. And if you think about long-standing problems, such as, if your mum was anxious or your dad was anxious, okay, you learned the tools of anxiety. You learned to be anxious. You learned to ask anxiety questions. You learned to think in an anxious way. Okay. But still, you have choice. Sitting here, wherever you are, you have some choice. You don't have no choice, right? You've got some choice. And that element of choice is the thing that we can lever to make changes for you, So if you want to do a little exercise, I'll just show you a little exercise which I've developed, which is quite interesting. It's in the Panic Pit Stop course under Life Change, in the module Life Change, if you want to look at it. And it's dead simple. And I call it 10 seconds on your toes. So do this with me. Put your feet flat on the floor and roll your toes like from the little toe to the big toe and back again. Now try and articulate each toe, right? Try and feel each toe as you go. And pay attention. Focus your attention on your toes. So your toes are on the ground. So you're grounding and you're feeling your toes. You're paying attention to your toes, right? 10 seconds on your toes. Now let me ask you this question. Where you are right now with your feet on the ground, just recognizing your toes and feeling your toes, is there anything you need to do? No. Right now, just sitting here or standing or whatever you're doing, just doing 10 seconds on your toes, is there anything wrong with you? No. So in that little instant of doing 10 seconds on your toes, you have been brought into the present moment. You've been brought into this moment of awareness that is now. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? Where are all of your problems located? Have a guess. You might say, in my leg. Nope, they're not in your leg. You might say, in my head. No, not really, not in your head. Where are your problems located? Well, the exercise that we've just done, if it went the way I would normally expect it to go, you would say, no, I don't have any problems in this moment. No, there's nothing I need to do in this moment. No, in this moment, there's nothing wrong with me. Okay? So all of your problems are located in the past and in the future. And that means that in the present moment, you don't really have any problems. Now, if that makes sense to you, I mean, sometimes it takes a bit just to understand the principle, but if that makes sense to you, that means that in this moment, you have an opportunity, you have a choice to change your life. And how do you do that? Well, we cleave back to Kung Fu Panda 1, where Po the Kung Fu Panda he's having a crisis of confidence, right? He's been nominated as the Dragon Warrior, and he goes, I'm not the Dragon Warrior, I can't train to be the Kung Fu Master. So he goes up the top of the mountain and he consults the wise turtle, Master Oogway. He says, Master Oogway, I'm not the Dragon Warrior. And Master Oogway goes, Dragon Warrior, no Dragon Warrior. The past is history, the future a mystery. Today is a gift. That is why it is called the present. And so, the question we ask is this: how do you make your future turn out how you want it to turn out? Well, the answer is you make your present moment, the moment that you have. This is the only moment you have to be alive. You make this moment look like, a bit like you want your future to look. So if you have long-standing anxiety, depression, or whatever, in this moment of awareness, you can make your future look a bit different. And what you do is you stitch these moments of awareness together and you get on a slightly different path. So if we think about thinking about long-term, long-standing problems, okay? When you look back at long-standing problems, you see long-standing problems, and you make the mistake of assuming that your past is your future. Your past is only if your future if you do nothing different, okay? But if you make the moment of awareness different, if you make a choice, right? If you decide to oppose anxiety, oppose depression in this moment, you make your future different because you've done something in the moment that you have to be alive, which is this moment in time. And so nothing is, oh gosh, I forgot to scroll down, so I didn't see all these other questions. Yes, it's hard to stay in the present moment. Okay. So the present moment is our intervention point. Now, I've worked with people who have what we might consider to be like really serious mental illnesses, you know, schizophrenia, you know, florid mania, you know, very severe PTSD, what we might call personality disorders, all sorts of things. Okay, so I've more or less seen it all. Well, I've never worked in a psychiatric. Oh, I have worked in a psychiatric hospital actually, but as a family therapist. So I've never actually worked in a secure unit. Let's put it that way. But I've seen everything else that you can see, and I've yet to meet someone who would not benefit from an intervention. So even with schizophrenia, you know, even with active psychotic symptoms, you can still make changes. You can still do something, but it's doing something in that moment is the intervention point, right? So you have choice. That's what I want to convey. Good. I like your comments. Thank you, everyone. Yep. Good. Now, how do I strengthen my ability to carry out what I want and not to take on other people's stuff? Okay. Oh, sorry, just before I do that one, sad things are all right. So should we ignore and like not pay attention to sad things? That's a really interesting one. I just want to like take a moment with that. Okay. Sadness is a legitimate emotion. You're entitled to feel sad, and some things are sad and you should feel sad. Just a simple one, right? If you have a pet that dies and you love the pet, you should feel sad. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, I'm going to call that a pure emotion, right? Sadness is a pure emotion. The problem comes when we contaminate it. So let's say we have the pet that dies, right? Pet dies, you feel sad, and then you start to say, I should have looked after the pet better. I should have taken the pet to the doctor, 3 hours earlier. I should have not gone on a holiday 3 years ago when the pet, got a thorn in its foot and it became, septic, right? That's contaminating the pure emotion of sadness with other stuff that you're bringing in. Excuse me. You're bringing in from memories, from how you feel about yourself, from what people tell you. So you're contaminating the pure emotion of sadness. So I think sadness, honors the value that we place on people and pets and things and places and stuff, right? So I think sadness is it's absolutely legitimate. Contaminating your sadness, I would even go so far as to say it's illegitimizing the care you've had for something, right? So if your pet dies and you contaminate the sadness with self-criticism, you're not sad about the pet anymore. You're sad about the fantasy thing or whatever that you did, right? So you've taken the focus off the pet and you've changed it to you, and then you're just using it as an excuse to beat yourself up, which would just be habits of thought, right? So be who you are, right? And be legitimate in your emotions. Try to recognize the difference between a pure emotion and a contaminated emotion. And if you can recognize the difference, right, all of a sudden we have that moment of choice again. All of a sudden we've got some control, and that gives us a chance to have a different experience. I always draw a picture. Let me see if I can draw a picture for you. If I had a pen, I would draw a picture for you. Here it is, look. Okay. Picture coming, everyone. Don't hang on. Picture. The Y shape is the picture. Okay. Now, You see this point here? This is your choice point. Now, let me just pull it back a bit. This is your path, and you always have choices. You're always, always, always being offered choices. I can feel anxious, or I can decide to challenge it. I can feel overwhelmed, or I can decide to challenge it. I can depress myself, or I can decide to challenge it. So as we go through life, we're being offered vast quantities of opportunities that we fail to see, and therefore we fail to use as kickoff points to give ourselves a different experience. Okay, so if you're used to believing that how you feel is entirely legitimate, then that's something that we need to work on, right? Because your feelings are often contaminated with history, with other people's experiences. So just for the final thing that I've got today, how do I strengthen my ability to carry out what I want and not take on other people's stuff? Typically, if you take on other people's stuff, I would say there are two things happening. The first one is you're probably a bit overly empathic, which means that you're overly in tune with what other people feel. But hang on, no. You're probably overly in tune with what you think other people feel, right? So that's a mind reading thing, okay? And the second thing is you probably don't feel that you have enough value to legitimize what you want. So other people's needs probably come before yours. And I have to say that if you're in a situation where you feel that other people are more important than you, or their needs are more important than yours, that's not so good. Now, if you're a mom, obviously you put the needs of your children first, okay? But there's a point at which the needs of your children have to come second. Otherwise, you'd do everything for them, right? Oh, I can't have little Johnny walking because he'll wear his feet out, so I carry him everywhere. I can't have him feeding himself because his arm will get tired, and then he won't like that. You know, obviously ludicrous, right? But we can go over the top. So we have to allow our children to fall over and hurt themselves. We've got to allow them to do stuff that, frankly, you go, oh my God, I wouldn't want you doing that. But they have to learn because we did it. And so there's a point at which you have to value yourself sufficiently to be able to say, well, I know you want that, but I don't want it. So the problem of not being able to stick with what you want or decide what you want starts a lot earlier, right? It comes with not feeling good enough about myself, that I feel like I legitimately have, I'm allowed to have wants, you know. I saw a woman some years ago, and I gave her this homework, and she went, "What? I couldn't possibly do that." You know what the homework was? I said, "Look, I'd like you to sit down and have a cup of tea and read a magazine for 10 minutes at some point during the day." She goes, "What? I can't possibly do that." And why not? Well, because I've got so many other things to do. Yeah, well, you know, well, I don't deserve it. Well, if you don't deserve to have 10 minutes to a cup of tea, you know, you can see that lots of other problems will grow out of that. Okay. So the solution is to start to value yourself more, and to recognize that mind reading other people is faulty thinking. It's just a trick. You can't read people's minds. You do not know what people are thinking. And typically, whenever people mind read, you know it's wrong. And it's just an opportunity for the negative things you believe about yourself to be flipped around, right? They think I'm useless. They think I'm a failure. They think I'm not worth anything. They think I'm stupid. No, they think, oh, birds and clouds, oh, and trees, oh. They think, oh, I hope I get a pay rise. They think, what's for dinner? They think, oh, there's a lot of traffic. They don't think about you, because people tend not to think about other people that much if they're not in your face and kind of like, you know. So there's two things going on. The mind reading one is an easy-ish one in a way. You should grab my faulty thinking ebook and read up about it, and then you get some exercises and you kind of understand the process, right? And the lack of personal value, that's a low self-esteem issue, and that, you know, takes a little bit more effort. So I've given you sort of quite a few interventions, so I don't want to overload you. So So the last kind of comment anyway. Karen says, how do we turn things around positively? Okay, let me synthesize it. I've said that you have a moment of awareness to be alive. In this moment, you have choice. Practice making choices that appear useful to you, right? Practice making choices that don't allow the anxiety to be in charge, that don't allow the depression to be in charge, that don't allow the panic to be in charge. You've got to kind of develop this persona, and I'll finish off with this kind of thought, right? You've got to develop this persona that basically says this: I have a problem, I am not the problem. Okay. Remember, Catherine? I have a problem, I am not the problem. And as soon as you can believe that, you now have something that you can work on that is not the problem, right? I have a problem with anxiety. I actually don't need to be anxious. I have a problem with anxiety. Brilliant. We can fix that. I'm not a bad person, but I have a problem with depression. Brilliant. I'm not at risk, but I have panic attacks. Fine. We can fix that, because no longer do you believe that you're the problem, and no longer is the problem sitting inside you. It's kind of like something that we can work on. We can say, well, what are the characteristics of it? How are we going to do something? What we're going to change, you know? And that's the kind of the critical thing, right? You are not the problem. You have a problem. And that gives you some distance from the problem, and it enables you to do interventions. It enables you to use the tools that we're providing here. So I think that's about 40 odd minutes of Facebook Live. Thank you for joining me. I think this is the second or third one I've done. So it's kind of interesting, really. So I appreciate it. We'll be doing some more. Please interact, right? I really appreciate being on the group and everything. And I want to, try and find ways to provide more active self-help tools for you. The truth is this, of course, you've got to do stuff, right? If you don't do stuff, nothing changes. And if you complain that nothing changes and you don't do stuff, okay. But I assume you're in the group because you want something to be different, okay? In that case, we've got to get on board and make something happen different. And just as a final thing, I don't know if it's there's a 20% discount offer for 24 hours on the Panic Pit Stop program bundle. So that's Panic Pit Stop, office hours, mood control, mindfulness journey, all sorts of stuff. So if you want to lock in a 20% discount, you've got I think till midnight tonight to do that. And that'll be, that basically will provide you with a plotted out, planned journey that will take you where you need to go. And you just got to basically follow the steps, right? You don't really have to think about it. I'd say devote about 10 minutes a day. But imagine that, right? I've called it a brilliant summer opportunity. Imagine that, let's say, you're going to commit. Let's say you're going to commit 2 or 3 months to the Panic Pit Stop program bundle, right? And you say, I'm going to do it, like you would on a diet. I'm going to commit 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 2 or 3 months. And you know what? You're free of the problems that you struggle with. Your life's different, right? You're actually free of wasting all that time and effort on anxiety, depression, panic, etc. But if you don't do it, nothing changes. So I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you very much for participating. I really appreciate it. Okay, have a great weekend.